Welcome back, everyone, to a brisk Saturday morning in the great Northwest. Even though we're darn near mid-March, as you can see, Mother Nature dropped about 4 inches of snow yesterday. So let me get this taken care of, and then we'll go in the shop and get started on the axles. Okay, now that that's done, let's get inside and get going on the axle. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm Mike, and this is my channel, Build It or Buy It, where I build things and determine whether that was the better way to go or whether I should have bought it. So, as you can see, I just set the axles up on there with tractor, so I'm going to work on getting the spring hangers tacked in place, and then that'll allow me to set the axles in there and the springs in there. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of regroup, let the shop warm up here a little bit, and then I'll move you in closer to see a little bit more detail how I'm going to set up the hangers in the correct spot. Stand by. Alrighty, so I've got you over here closer to the trailer, and as we discussed in some of the earlier episodes, I measured out and just made some marks on the frame where the center of the axles will go, and then transfer those measurements over to where the spring hangers would go. And spring hanger locations are based on, there's only 2 or 3 different spring hanger locations that are kind of normal for the industry, and those are based on Alrighty, so I've got you over here on the working platform, and I took those measurements that we talked about in the previous episodes as far as where the center or the balance point is going to be, plus the 200 pounds tongue weight, and I transferred that center line over to the trailer, which is the center spring hanger that you can see here. This spring hanger right here, and that you can see over there. And then I measured out from that to set the other spring hanger in place. And there's only 2 or 3 spacing specs, and those are based on the center to center of the eyes on your spring type. And so there's plenty of resources online that tell you that for a spring eye that has, let's say, a 25 and a, see, these are a 25 1/4 inch spring eye to eye measurement. On those springs, the hangers themselves, the center point of the hangers, so this center point of this hanger here as compared to the center point of that hanger there, that measurement should be 29 1/2 for the spring hangers, or the spring set that I have. So that's where all those brackets are just sitting there right now. Trying to get the brackets perfectly in line and straight with the frame, that can be a little bit tricky. So what I did here is I had a piece of the scrap channel, and it fits perfectly down in the bottom of the spring hangers. See if I can get you a halfway decent angle there. So it fits perfectly in these spring hangers, just right down at the bottom, tucks in tight. So by laying that in there, that makes sure that the spring hangers themselves are kind of both in the same plane, and that there's no twist to them. And then also what I did, as you see in there, was to use the vice grips and then clamp that piece of channel down tight to the main frame. That holds them tight. And then because I basically took the frame and made sure that it was exactly parallel on the outside and on the inside, that guarantees that they are spaced dead center in the middle of the frame. So if the frame by chance, I mean, I did double check the frame with center to center to make sure it matches exactly the spring pads, which are this portion of the axle. These spring pads here, those match the center of the frame exactly. So that way I don't have to worry about offsetting the spring hangers themselves, so they can be centered directly on the main frame rail. So I got a couple of those clamped in the exact position. I'm going to tack them. Again, even though the measurements should get me really close, I'm not going to completely weld those down in case I don't like the balance and I do need to move the springs a little bit. I can just cut the tacks loose and move them. So I'm going to get these tacked in, and I'll move the channel down. I didn't have a piece of channel long enough to span all three. That would have been optimal, but 2 at a time still keeps them lined up. So I'm going to get these all tacked in place, both sides. I'll set you up on a time lapse on that. And then I'll come back, we'll move the springs or the axles into their general location, get the springs bolted in and the axles clamped to the springs, and you kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like. Okie dokie, those are, for the most part, set in place. I can't drop the last couple bolts in because the brake drums are actually sitting on the work platform, so that won't quite let the springs, the axles drop enough to drop this last set of bolts in. So I'll just have to prop one end of the trailer up to get those set up. And then at that point, we're frankly ready to go outside and flip this thing over. I do want to touch on the axles themselves. If and when you build your trailer, there are a left side and a right side on the axles that basically affects which way they rotate. The electric brake mechanisms are designed to work better one way. There's actually a primary shoe and a secondary shoe. So there's a lot of different ways tell depending on the manufacturer. Sometimes you can pull the drum off, and there's plenty of pictures online that show which way the arm should that the magnet's attached to should be. It should be on the front. Some of the manufacturers, you can tell where the wires come out of the backing plate. This manufacturer happens to stamp a right and a left on the backing plate, so that makes it the easiest. So right and left on a trailer is the same as it would be in a vehicle. It's if, in essence, you were standing on the trailer deck or standing behind the trailer deck looking forward through the tongue. That's the orientation that you would stand on a trailer to determine left and right. So in the case of today, these axles right here, that's the left side because the trailer's upside down. So when it flips over, that'll be the left side. However, since this is forward viewing camera and YouTube, it'll probably reverse the image, so you'll probably think that I don't know my left from my right, but trust me, that is the left when it's upright. So I'm gonna go take a quick lunch break, and I'll come back, and I'll probably come around with a tractor. It's easier to come around with a tractor and pick the one end up, and then we'll get those bolted in, and then at that point, we'll be ready to flip it over. So I'll probably wait for a little bit warmer weather. So I'll be back here in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back after a quick bite to eat. I'll kind of show, I did some things also after lunch before I turned the camera on. I kind of forgot to turn it on, to be honest, but nothing major. So as you can see, the axles are up there. They've got tires on them. So I finished blocking the trailer up about another, I don't know, another 10 inches or so. Left me room to not only get the axles, the springs in, the spring hangers, but also put the tires on. So it's definitely ready to be flipped over. One more thing I decided to do while I've got it in this position, because it's just easier to do, is there's a mount right here for the J-box, the front J-box. There's also a mount for a mid J-box and a rear J-box right here, and then down there. So that way I'm not a real fan of, definitely won't be any Scotch locks on this trailer, but even butt connections are fine. But it's nice to be able to terminate things, so the brakes and the fender clearance lights will terminate in that mid junction box, and then the stop tail turn will terminate at the rear, and then at the front will be where the main cable comes in, as well as the trailer plug. And this is the J-box that came with the kit. Move it around here so you can see it. It's got a nice molded 7-way plug on it with a junction box that's color coded. It's kind of nice because it's got the individual colors on the end of the studs as well as labeled. So that came with the axle kit that I bought. So that'll go at the front, and there'll be a couple more. I also, at the strategic locations, I also tack welded on. You can see here, little 1/4-inch studs everywhere. There's a row of them down the middle that you can see. And that'll allow me some cable clamps instead of using little spring clips or things. That way they're permanently mounted, and I can put cable clamps on there with just a nylock nut so they don't fall off. So I guess that's about it for now. Okay, so we've got a slight detour. I know I said I was gonna pull the trailer out and flip it over, which I'm gonna do here in probably about 20 minutes. But in the meantime, I had ordered a tongue box, toolbox, you can see there in the video right here. And it came in. So since I've got it and know now exactly what the dimensions are and its height is, I'm going to go ahead and put the mount, or build the mount and attach that for the toolbox, because it's a little bit easier to do while it's upside down. So I bent a couple of pieces up off camera. It's simply just some flat bar here. You can see with it needed to come up about 1 inch or so. I want the top of the toolbox to be just slightly below the deck. That way, if I needed to extend something out partway in here into the tongue, that it wouldn't hit the toolbox. So at any rate, just bent this just 2-inch by 3/16 flat bar, hot rolled. I bent the ends down to give me the inch or 1.125 offset that I need. I'm just going to tack those into place, or weld those into place, and then indeed we will be ready to move the trailer outside and make an attempt at flipping it over. So I'm going to get that done, and then we will get the shop door opened, and you'll see how that goes. I did there was I just clamped those onto, since each piece is independent, I just clamped those onto a piece of flat plate, a piece of 3/8 plate. That way it holds them on the kind of on the same plane so that it's not trying to, when I bolt the toolbox down, it's not trying to pull the toolbox at a square. So that'll keep those flat on the same plate. I'll get them welded in and then we'll flip it over. Okay, so those are welded. I just cleaned them up a little bit with a flat disc, take any sharp edges off. So I think I'm going to pause it here because I got a little bit of stuff to clean up off the trailer, and then I'll come back and we'll pull it outside. I'll move you guys out here a little closer. You can see how I'm going to go about doing this. I'm going to get the new trailer just sitting on the ground as is, and then I'll flip it over afterwards. Move you guys over so you can get a better view. One thing you guys can do in the comments if you want is you can see if you can pick out how many OSHA violations that probably occurred during this operation. this so none of you think he has no clue what he's doing. I totally expected this could fall. That front sawhorse, it is in the sand, so as I lower it down to the wheels, because of the angle, it could try to kick that out, but it is what it is. It's certainly not going to hurt anything. I'm not going to be anywhere underneath it. So let's hope it stays on the sawhorse, but if it doesn't, so be it. It'll still be on the ground, and then I'm going to grab it and flip it over. Well, too bad this wasn't like BattleBots. If I had a self-righting mechanism, it could just flip itself over. So what I'm going to do here is I'll chain to the far side instead of trying to flip it over forwards, and then you potentially could have a runaway. So I'm going to chain to the far side. I'm just going to make a guess at about the balance point, and then the tires and wheels will just be a hinge, and I'll pull it up towards me, backing the tractor up, and then kind of when it reaches the apex, I'll make sure the chains are tight. I'll probably put a zip tie on the chain so there's no way that it could disconnect if there was a slack period, and then I'll just keep backing up and layer down the other way. And hopefully, now that I'm thinking about it, I only put 4 fairly small tacks on each one of the spring hangers, and because I'll be hinging it on the tires and wheels, hopefully those tacks are sufficient. So we'll get rigged up here and then see how it goes. All right, well that went pretty well. What's the OSHA violation count up to? Probably at least a half a dozen. None of the welds broke loose. That cross member didn't break and fall out. That was the one cross member I mentioned that one of the two that has to be welded in after I cut and bend the beaver tail down. So that's why it fell out. So no harm, no foul there. Well, we'll see if we have any excitement. There's, of course, the trailer coupler is a 2 5/16 coupler, and there's only a 2-inch ball on the four-wheeler. So, but there's a pretty good amount of tongue weight. So, we'll see as I run it around the shop. If I don't come back right away, that means it pop off the ball, but no biggie. So that all went well. I'm going to pause it here because while I've got it out of there, I'm going to do some pick it up in the shop and get the floor swept up good so I'm not running around on grinding dust. And then I'll bring you back and we'll talk about next steps. Okay, as you can see there, I got it back inside. I put it back on the stands and leveled those. Not that I would have had to. So that's done. Next thing I'm going to do is start working on, I'll probably take you inside and show you on the computer what I'm doing. I didn't show a real detailed version early on, what I'm going to do with the hinges, because there's kind of the way kind of the industry does it, which I don't like because it's a little bit, the ramp makes the ramps a little floppy, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to change up. I'm going to use a single hinge instead of a double hinge. So it's easier to take in and on the computer and show you what that looks like. So I've got to start cutting that. That's what that piece of pipe on the trailer deck is for. That piece of pipe right there. It'll create a concave piece here at the back frame that the hinge will stick in. So I'm going to get going on that, and then we'll see where we're at video length-wise on this episode. And so I'll bring you back in a few minutes. Okay, we're back in here at the computer, as you can see. And because I talked about how I'm going to do the hinges, I wanted to give you kind of a close-up view of what I'm going to do versus what you typically see on other trailers. I'm going to move down here. Typically, this is the design that most companies do. It's a double pin affair. So you can see here the ramp is folded up, and there's one set of hinge pins and a hinge bracket, and then another hinge pin and a hinge bracket attached to the trailer. This one is attached to the ramp. This one's attached to the trailer. And then depicted here by the green box is a plate that holds both of the pins on each side. Kind of think about it like a bicycle chain type affair. So there's two pins with a plate that holds them together. So then when the ramp is unfolded, same thing, that square block that holds the two pins from spreading apart, that's there. that allows the hinge or the ramp to fold down and still be on this same plane. The one thing I don't like about that, as you can see here, it opens up a pretty good sized gap between your ramp and your trailer, as well as then there's 2 pins to worry about. And as you can imagine, unless these were a very precise fit with a bearing or something, they're kind of floppy, which I guess doesn't hurt anything on a trailer, but I just don't like this gap area. So what I'm going to do, and the only other way to do a hinge with a single pin, which is what I'm going to do, is you have to, if you imagine this green line here depicts the intersection, if you were to extend the plane of the channel and the framework of the ramp. So you can kind of see that's where they would both intersect, is in that point right there. So the only way you can use a single hinge is you have the center of your pin has to be exactly in that spot. Otherwise the ramp wouldn't fold down flat against the frame, and when you folded it out here, it also wouldn't come around. So as you can see, I'm pivoting on that intersection of that green line. So that's where that hinge has to lie. So if the channel was still fully squared off like that, there's no way you could put a pin in there because there's metal in the way. So what that pipe that I pointed to on the trailer is for, and that's depicted here by these red arcs, is I'll cut this portion of the channel out. You can see the little leg left over. A quarter of it will get cut out, and I'll use a quarter of that pipe and then a quarter of the pipe for this, and this creates this open area in here. This line is just to depict where that intersection is. That won't actually be here. I'll also end up putting, just give you a rough idea of what I would do with, I'll have a gusset in here, something like this, just to support that piece of pipe. So that'll be there when I'm done. So then now what happens is, once you've got that piece of pipe in place, you can see those are just basically the hinge plates. There'll be one on each side attached to the framework of the trailer, and then one attached to the ramp. And then there'll be one in the middle. If we went back and looked here, so there's going to be one out here on this end. There's going to be one in the center, and then there'll also be one here in the middle to give extra support. And then that will also allow these ramps to slide in this way, in this view, up and down, but left and right. So you can be able to slide them all the way out to the outside, or you can slide them in to where they touch in the middle. So that's the purpose of that piece of pipe out there and how that'll work. So then again, you as you swing that ramp, as you swing those ramps, that bracket swings with it, as you can see there. So anyway, that's the whole intent of and the purpose of that piece of pipe. So it'll let, and then when it comes all the way around and touches, it ends up creating that half arc again. And so anyway, that's the scoop on that piece of pipe. So I just wanted to kind of show you that because it's kind of hard to see or kind of envision without seeing it laid out on paper. So we'll head back out to the shop and get going on cutting this portion right here out and inserting that quarter piece of pipe and tack welding it in. That's a given position, and then the other piece won't get put in until the ramps are built.